They say a police badge is a symbol of trust, of duty, of service, of honor. But what happens when the person behind that badge, the one sworn to protect, becomes the very threat the badge was meant to guard us against? This is not a story of a cop doing a bad job. This is a story of a man who wore the uniform and then shattered every ounce of faith placed in it. His name, James Riley, a police constable, and a man whose twisted obsession would nearly cost a young woman her life. What drove him to the edge, and how did a man trained to chase criminals become the criminal himself? Let's rewind.
Welcome to Dark Chronicles, where shadows hide the truth.
James Riley was not your average officer. Colleagues described him as sharp, observant, a man who knew how the system worked, perhaps too well. In the beginning, there were no signs, no record of violence, no official complaints, just a quiet, seemingly dedicated officer with a steady job and a bright future. But behind the uniform, something darker was growing, and that darkness had a name: Ellie Moxom. Ellie was 24. Brilliant, a PhD student at Lancaster University, ambitious, kind, independent. She had her whole life ahead of her, and for a time, she shared that life with Riley. They met during her studies. What started as a romance quickly turned into a controlling relationship. One where Riley's jealousy simmered beneath the surface, unspoken, but ever present. When Ellie tried to leave, Riley didn't take it well. He didn't scream. He didn't lash out, but something in him cracked. He couldn't let go. On November 10, 2022, Ellie and Riley had one last night out. They had tickets to a concert, bought long before the relationship soured. Ellie, ever the peacemaker, thought it might be a calm goodbye. But for Riley, it was never just goodbye. It was a final shot. A final hope, a final moment to reclaim control. After the concert, they checked into a hotel in central Manchester. What happened next would haunt Ellie forever, and turn Riley from officer to fugitive. Room 305. That's where everything changed. Just after 11 p.m., a 999 call came in. The caller didn't leave a name, didn't stay on the line, but the voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. They said a woman had been hurt, badly, at a hotel in Manchester. First responders arrived within minutes. What they found inside the room was chaos, furniture knocked over, bedding torn, a smashed lamp, and in the middle of it all, Ellie, barely conscious, gasping for air, clinging to life. Paramedics rushed to stabilize her. She had injuries consistent with strangulation, oxygen deprivation. Her brain was already showing signs of swelling. But among the wreckage, officers found something else, a police warrant card. It didn't belong to a random guest. It wasn't lost or forgotten. It had a name: James Riley, Lancashire Police. Immediately, the room turned from a rescue scene into a crime scene. Where was Riley? Was he hurt too? Had he fled? Or was he watching from somewhere nearby? Detectives moved fast. They secured the hotel, pulled CCTV footage, and began combing through every frame. It didn't take long. One camera caught him slipping down the hotel fire escape just minutes after the 999 call. He wasn't limping. He wasn't disoriented. He was on the phone, calculating. The call, later confirmed to be the one made to emergency services, had come from his mobile, but he'd withheld his name, trying to stay invisible. It didn't work. Within hours, another call came in, this time from Riley's own mother. Her voice shaking, she told police her son had called her. He said he'd done something terrible. He said he'd killed Ellie, and now, he planned to take his own life. That changed everything. Riley wasn't just a suspect. He was a suicidal fugitive, a trained officer, a man who knew how to avoid being caught. The manhunt kicked into overdrive. Former colleagues were now hunters. Friends were now interviewees. Every road, every CCTV feed, every license plate reader, they were watching. Riley had fled the hotel on foot after crashing his car. He ditched his phone, changed his clothes, used every tactic he knew to stay ahead. He wasn't just running, he was erasing himself, and yet. The evidence trail had already begun to form. Investigators knew Riley was smart. He trained alongside them, sat through the same briefings, learned the same tactics they were now using against him. But no matter how careful he tried to be, the city watched him. CCTV captured him sprinting through the hotel car park, throwing glances over his shoulder, then, recklessly speeding off in his car, veering into the wrong lane. Nearly hitting a wall, moments later, he crashed into a barrier. But instead of staying, instead of waiting for help, he ran, abandoning his phone, ditching his jacket, blending into the streets like a ghost. And Ellie, she was now in a medically induced coma, her brain starved of oxygen. No one knew if she'd make it through the night, but if she woke up, her testimony would change everything. Riley wasn't just trying to disappear, he was trying to rewrite the ending. Psychologists would later describe his behavior as textbook escalation, a man obsessed, spiraling, his need for control overwhelming every rational thought. When Ellie tried to move on, he didn't just feel rejected, he felt erased, and for someone like Riley, that was unbearable. To the outside world, he'd been calm, collected, professional, but behind closed doors, jealousy boiled, possessiveness festered. He didn't just want Ellie's love, he wanted control over her entire world. After hours on the run, Riley did something unexpected. He didn't flee the country, he didn't disappear into the night. He went home, to his parents' house in Bradford. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe, in some twisted way, he thought they'd protect him, but they didn't. His father locked the front door, his mother called the police, and Riley, cornered, locked himself in the bathroom. Outside, the flashing blue lights of justice had arrived. Officers waited, no weapons drawn, no shouting, just quiet determination. Eventually, Riley emerged, disheveled, broken. He was arrested without resistance, but the real battle, the one that would decide Ellie's fate and Riley's punishment, was just beginning. With James Riley in custody, investigators shifted into overdrive. Now it wasn't just about finding him, it was about proving what he had done. Beyond any reasonable doubt, the Crown Prosecution Service reviewed the evidence, CCTV showing Riley fleeing the hotel, the anonymous 999 call traced to his phone, Ellie's near-fatal injuries, and the confession to his own mother. But there was one key element missing, Ellie's voice. For days, it was uncertain whether she would survive. Doctors fought to reduce the swelling in her brain, unsure if she would ever regain consciousness, or her memory. Miraculously, she pulled through, but when she woke up, she didn't remember the attack. It was a cruel twist of fate, surviving something horrific but having no recollection of the person who nearly killed you. Still, the physical evidence was overwhelming. At Manchester Crown Court, James Riley was charged with attempted murder. In the courtroom, the contrast was stark. On one side, Ellie, frail, trembling, accompanied by counselors and doctors. A woman who had nearly lost her life. On the other, Riley, silent, composed, dressed in a suit, a man who once wore a badge, now shackled by shame. The prosecution laid out their case. They painted a picture of a manipulative man, one who couldn't handle rejection, who saw Ellie not as a partner, but as possession. They highlighted his calculated actions, delaying help, discarding evidence, fleeing the scene, confessing only when he thought he had no way out. His defense team tried a different narrative. They argued that it was a moment of emotional breakdown, that Riley didn't plan the attack, that he panicked and fled, not out of malice, but confusion and fear. They even questioned whether he intended to kill Ellie at all. But the evidence spoke louder than excuses. Strangulation isn't an accident. The pressure required to cause the injuries Ellie sustained takes time, takes intent, takes rage. Riley didn't stop when she struggled. He stopped when he thought she was gone. The press latched onto the story. police officer accused of attempted murder splashed across headlines. Public trust in law enforcement, already fragile, was rocked again. Talk shows debated the case, online forums exploded. With speculation, was Riley just one bad apple, or a sign of something more systemic? And throughout it all, Ellie, though silent. After weeks of evidence, testimony, and expert analysis, the jury reached their decision. James Riley was found guilty of attempted murder. The judge did not hold back. In sentencing, he called Riley's actions a gross abuse of trust and a chilling betrayal of duty. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 2/3 of the term. For Ellie, the journey was far from over. Her injuries, both physical and psychological, would take years to heal, but justice, at least, had been served, and for once, the badge didn't protect the man behind it, it exposed him. James Riley may be behind bars, but the aftermath of his actions ripples far beyond a courtroom. For Ellie, every breath is a reminder of the hotel room, the moment everything went dark, the face of someone she once trusted, now woven into her nightmares. Though she has little memory of the attack itself, her life has been fundamentally changed. She suffered traumatic brain injuries, periods of memory loss, emotional instability. Her academic career, once filled with promise, was paused indefinitely. In public, she became a symbol of survival, of justice, of resilience, but in private, she faced a reality few could understand, because the man who almost killed her wasn't a stranger, he was her ex-boyfriend, her partner, a police officer. And that made the wound even deeper. One of the most haunting details to emerge post-trial was the house. Ellie and Riley had once bought a property together, under both their names. After the attack, Ellie wanted to sell it, to cut ties, move on, and close that chapter. But Riley refused. Even from prison, he used the joint mortgage as leverage, holding onto it, refusing to sign. A silent form of control that lingered beyond the bars. It was a chilling reminder, even in chains. Riley still sought to dominate her life. As news outlets covered the case, the narrative shifted from the individual to the institution. Was Riley an anomaly, or a symptom? Former officers weighed in. Some defended the system. You can't predict what someone might do years down the line. Others admitted failure. We should have seen the signs. We should have acted sooner. The public wasn't convinced. They pointed to broader questions. Should psychological evaluations be mandatory every few years? Should officers with personal relationship complaints be monitored more closely? How much power is too much power in the hands of one man? Social media campaigns trended. #Justice for Ellie, #Reform the badge, #Trust broken, and beneath every tweet, every comment, every post, was the same underlying fear: if a man like James Riley can pass the vetting process, how many more like him are out there? A police uniform is meant to symbolize protection, but for Ellie, it became a symbol of betrayal. Riley used that uniform to build trust, to shield his true nature, to give himself authority, and when that mask finally slipped, it almost cost someone their life. This wasn't just about one man, it was about the power we give people, and how fragile that power becomes in the wrong hands. In the aftermath of Riley's conviction, police forces across the UK quietly reviewed their internal policies. How do you stop a person like James Riley before it's too late? That question echoed through every precinct, every training seminar, every locker room conversation. There were no easy answers. Riley had no formal complaints lodged against him, no history of violent behavior on duty. To the outside world, he was the model officer, disciplined, reliable, respected, but inside, he was unraveling. What made it so dangerous was how well he hid it, and the badge, it didn't just hide it, it protected it. One of the most debated points during the trial and beyond was this: was the attack premeditated? Prosecutors believed the signs were clear. he waited until they were alone. He attacked without warning, and he made no attempt to help Ellie after, only to run, hide, and cover his tracks. But the defense argued something different, that Riley snapped. That this was a tragic, sudden loss of control, rooted not in planning, but in obsession and emotional collapse. Even now, experts are divided, but one thing is clear: he didn't call for help immediately. He waited, he fled, and he let Ellie nearly die before doing anything. That decision alone, for many, spoke volumes. Perhaps one of the most quietly heroic moments in the story belongs to Riley's father. When James showed up at their home, disheveled, disturbed, and defeated, his father did something many might hesitate to do. He locked the front door, he kept his son inside, and he called the police. It wasn't just the right thing to do, it was an act of courage. Because even when your child becomes a monster, doing the right thing still costs something. For that family, the sentence wasn't just years in prison, it was years of shame, heartbreak, and grief. So what do we take away from this? That evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it wears a badge. Sometimes, it smiles politely. Sometimes, it waits until it's alone with you. And then it decides your life doesn't matter anymore. But evil isn't the end of the story. Ellie lived. She survived. She stood in court. She faced the man who tried to silence her, and proved that her voice couldn't be erased. And that is what truly shattered James Riley, not the sentence, not the trial, but the fact that she is still here, and he is not. Today, Ellie Moxom continues to rebuild her life. The road ahead is still steep, filled with therapy sessions, checkups, flashbacks, and legal paperwork. But she's walking it, on her terms, without fear. She's resumed her studies part-time, refusing to let the trauma define her future. She speaks, when she can, to domestic abuse advocacy groups, quietly, powerfully, without bitterness, because she knows her story, as horrific as it is, could save someone else. Someone who's dating a partner that won't let go. Someone who feels controlled but can't explain how. Someone whose instincts are whispering, this isn't love. This is ownership. And she's right. Riley didn't just want to be loved, he wanted possession. To decide when Ellie smiled, where she lived, who she texted, and in the end, whether she breathed. But she broke free. She didn't die in that room. She didn't stay silent. She didn't allow Riley's final act of violence to define her entire existence. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies are under increasing pressure to evolve. Mandatory psychological evaluations, clearer whistleblower protocols, stricter relationship conduct codes for officers. All of these reforms are being considered, because of cases like this, because James Riley wasn't the first, and unless the system changes, he won't be the last. The badge can't just be a symbol of authority, it must come with relentless accountability, and emotional fitness needs to matter as much as physical readiness, because no uniform can hide a monster forever. We tell stories like this not for shock value, not for headlines, but for truth, because Ellie Moxom is more than a victim, she's a survivor, she's a name worth remembering, and James Riley, he's a warning, a reminder that evil can exist even in the most trusted spaces, that obsession isn't love, and that silence, especially from those in power, isn't strength, it's complicity. Let this case be a wake-up call, for law enforcement, for mental health professionals, for anyone who still believes he seemed like a nice guy is enough. We believed in the badge, now we believe in the woman who outlived it, because when justice sleeps, stories like Ellie's shake it awake.
So that's how crimes end, and if you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you want me to do some special crimes in all over the world, comment down below, or you can send us direct through email, and I will see you in all my videos. See ya!